Yeah, about this project of yours, the KTEL band. I listened to several of your cover songs, and you seem to be really into these beautiful 70s pop songs like 10 cc's or
Yeah.
Paul McCartney. Is that where you draw most of your inspiration from?
You know, not necessarily all of it, but you have to remember the 70s was, I think, the period between 1970 and 1979. And maybe even the early 80s. That was the time period in rock music where um, songwriting was the featured thing. I mean, the craft of songwriting was perfected during those years to me. And I'm not saying that people aren't writing good songs anymore. I'm saying that other things now are have come into play that share the stage with songwriting. You've got vocalists and video and dance moves and other things, but everything from Jackson Brown and Joni Mitchell and Paul McCartney and J.D. Souther, Andrew Gold. I mean, these were amazing, amazing songwriters, and their music. Although I was too young to experience the '70s, as a teenager, I was a kid. I was like 5 years old, but those songs, for some reason, they hold a really warm spot in my heart. I love those songs. I miss that era of, I not so much the era, because like I said, I was too young, but I miss that craft, that the songwriting itself. It seems to be sort of um, an art form that's not quite as featured as it used to be.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, these are some of my favorites as well. Jackson Brown, for example. But also, you're right. I think nowadays artists like that exist, but they're not so prominent in the media. Like, you have to dig a bit deeper to discover such great songwriters.
Yeah. Well, also, you got to add to that the fact that the way people create music is very different than it was 30 years ago. People create music on computers, and playing an instrument is not as important as it used to be. Not because nobody wants to play an instrument, but because playing an instrument is hard and it takes time. And to write a song on a computer and kind of fix it in the mix and do the stuff they do, you can still make a beautiful piece of artwork in no time, and you don't even have to be an expert at playing piano. And that's just, at the time, 30, 40 years ago, you didn't have that option. You pretty much either could play it or you had to get someone to play it for you, and that was your only option. And so it's kind of changed our approach to music. And it's not that we're not making good music, it's just our approach to it is very different. So the art itself has changed, and the priorities when making that music is different than it was before. So I don't know, maybe I'm nostalgic for just sitting down with a pen and paper and a piano. um, Obviously I still write with a computer and do things I need to do, but I think for the younger kids, for people that are in their 20s and younger, they're just discovering music, you know, they're not going to have that experience. Their experience is going to be a different approach, and that's just the way it is.
Uh, yeah, I guess music has to keep evolving in one way or another, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Speaking of which, how do you approach the music that you do for television? Because you did a lot of work. Your music can be heard on a lot of different networks like HBO, TLC, some famous shows like The Bachelor or Pawn Stars. So, how do you approach writing a piece for television or for a film? How is that
Well,
different from what you normally do?
well, I started out obviously as a songwriter, and songwriting, film scoring, and TV music, they're totally different. All three are very kind of different disciplines, um, but they all kind of draw some similarities. So for film, if you're doing film scoring and things like that, it's not, you know, the 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 criteria for the piece of music you're writing don't fall into the same parameters as a 3 minute pop song. So you can throw all that out the window because you don't need to follow that. Um, it's more about expressing a feeling and a communication of what the director is trying to express. So you're basically there as a way to help the script tell the story. You're additive. You know, you're adding value to the script, and not a commentary on it. So it's a very different approach to songwriting or music writing. I mean, I can talk about the technical aspects of it. I mean, it's usually, you know, when I sit down to write a song, my to go instrument is piano, and I'll sit down and come up with something that I think is a good hook. If this is going to be for a song, it's got to be something that someone can sing or I can sing. So there's a different approach to it. When you're writing, you know, music for background music or for, you know, scoring stuff, your direction for writing that piece of music is completely from a different perspective. And so that naturally forces you to write in different ways. You know, it might be an instrument that gives you inspiration or something that leads you to the next phrase or whatever you do. So it's just it depends on what you're writing. You know, I hope that wasn't confusing, but
Yeah, Jeff. Before I ask you a question that's been kind of stuck in my head for the past couple of minutes, I just want to quickly ask you: do you enjoy writing music for television as much as you do, you know, for your own kind of hobby, or you know, can you enjoy writing for television as much, equally,
yeah,
so to say?
I mean, you know, music's music, and it all comes from the same place. It's kind of like when you're a singer and you're singing, you know, you're basically communicating to your audience or whomever's listening. And when you're playing piano, you're channeling the same information through an instrument, through the piano. When you're writing for film and TV, you're channeling the same information, that communication, through those mediums. So it all comes from the same place. So yeah, I can find pleasure, and obviously I love doing it. Anything that's music, I want to do. Um, you know, one thing that's nice about films is that you're not real unless you're given very specific instructions. You know, I need a pan flute and I want a, you know, a tabla, a pan flute, and a violin or something. You know, obviously you've got parameters to work with, but generally the way you approach music is different than it. Like I said, if you write a song, so it's a lot more freeing. You know, there's not as many constraints on you. There's really no limit to what you could come up with uh, to help get that message out, to get that communication through that medium. With songwriting, now songwriting is a whole different thing. Songwriting, especially if you're trying to write for a pop market, you know, songwriting is about discipline because you're given a very finite set of, you know, of parameters to write within. uh, unlike film music. So it's a very different kind of approach. And film and writing for songs, sorry, writing for songs has its own inspiration and its own interest because there's something very challenging about trying to stay within a certain parameter and coming up with something brilliant if you can within a finite set of rules. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and I'm really glad that you can enjoy both jobs, and that you can find meaning in music, in, you know, every shape and form, so to say. But now I want to ask you about something that you mentioned before. Um, you know, my question now is regarding how young people nowadays approach music. You know, nowadays you have Spotify, YouTube, Tidal, Deezer, and all these online places where you can find your music. So I think that people are kind of moving away from buying actual CDs and records. So what is your take on that trend?
Well, being that I grew up when vinyl was still the main thing and then CDs, I'll always be a little saddened by the fact that people aren't interested in holding something in their hands. Um, but you have to understand the way when you think about the way we consume entertainment, it's not like it used to be. So naturally, the mediums of the day, streaming right now, are going to be more popular, and that's just something that like you said earlier, the evolution of music is the evolution of everything else. Is just going to continue. But if you can, I don't know how old you guys are, but I'm assuming you're probably not much younger than me. I hope. Um, but you guys remember CDs, But the thing is when
Of
you would go
course.
to the store, the thing about music back many years ago is music was a feature. It wasn't a background. It was something where you would buy a record, take it home, put it on your record player or your CD player, open the pamphlet up, look at the lyrics, see the pictures. It was an experience. Now, music seems to be taking a back seat to, it's got to compete with video, and it's got to compete with games, and it's got to compete with movies, and it's got to compete with YouTube and Facebook and social media and Twitch. And, I'm not saying that music is not important to people, but it just has a different purpose than it used to. And so if you look at it from that perspective, it's not really surprising that people don't want to go out and buy something. They just want to stream it. So if you ask me, do I like it? No, not really. I'd rather you go out and buy a piece of music, sit down with it, and make that your evening. But it doesn't happen anymore, and for the reasons I just mentioned. And I guess there's a little bit of sadness that comes along with that, but you know, it's just the way things have evolved. The way I'm sure that many, many, many years ago, when let's see a good example, but when record players first came around, I don't know, 150 years ago, or whatever, people probably were like, well, there goes live music. No one's going to want to go out and see a band, so that didn't happen. So you know, it just
Yes, Jeff. I'm not gonna lie. To be fair, I'm quite young, and I find my music on Deezer and on YouTube. So if I were to buy a CD, I would approach it, I would look at it as a gift or as something, special, because I can find my music whenever I want. I just, it just takes a
yeah.
few clicks. And this is something that Vlada and I often talk about. And we even joke about it because nowadays you just don't feel that need to buy an actual CD because that's not your main source of music anymore.
I agree. I totally understand that. And with all the music that I play for people and the bands that I'm in, I don't have time to go out and buy this music either. It's easy to find things on. I mean, the internet has made things extremely easy to find anything you're looking for. So from that perspective, that makes sense. What I was referring to was the fact that music itself doesn't seem to be the main event unless you're going to a concert. Music is something you do while you're doing something else, while you're working out, while you're playing a game, while you're, some people have music on while they're reading a book. I mean, the point is that there was a time when music was so important that, it was important to put the record on and listen to what the artist was saying from beginning to end. I'm not suggesting that people that are younger that aren't doing that with the streams or even MP3s or something, but I don't think it's as commonplace.
Yes,
You know
Jeff,
what I mean?
exactly. Um, now I want to ask you. So we've just discussed, your personal opinion. Now I want to ask you, how does this affect you as a professional musician?
Well, when you refer to this, I'm not sure. I mean, I could answer that in a million ways, but what specifically are you referring to?
So this trend of moving on from buying CDs and switching to online platforms, online streaming platforms. So how does that affect you as someone who basically creates music every year, every month?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it doesn't really change the way I make music. I still sit down with a piano or a keyboard and compose something and record just like everybody else, one track at a time. So, from the creation standpoint, I'm using tools that I didn't have 30 years ago, but yeah, I mean, the creation point of view is still the same. But in terms of how we consume music is a little different, and the immediacy of it is actually kind of cool. I mean, you can put something online and within minutes know if people like it or not, or just the satisfaction of having being able to publish something immediately is something that we didn't have many years ago. So from that perspective, it's actually quite exciting, and I think that it can be very inspiring knowing that I could write something today, and at the end of the day, thousands of people could be listening to it.
Um, that's great. But I have another question for you, and it's about live performances. I wonder what kind of venues do you prefer playing in, since you're on tour often and you probably go to a number of different venues. So, do you prefer larger venues or more intimate settings?
Well, I like the more intimate settings, to be honest. I've played very large ones and I've played a lot of small ones, and I find that when you can see their faces and you can really react to what people are responding to, when you can see them reacting to you. And so there's this communication that you have that is a little difficult when you're, in front of 10,000 people. You try to concentrate on maybe the first row or two, but you're not really performing for them. You're performing for all of them. So it's a different kind of approach. So as a musician, and I think a lot of musicians might say this. I mean, the intimate venues is more immediate. It's where I think I shine more in a smaller setting. Um, Not to say that the energy of a lot of people coming back at you in a big stadium or something. Obviously, that's very exciting, but it's performance wise, it's a different approach. It's a different animal altogether.
Yes, and since we are now witnessing this coronavirus thing, and a lot of
Yeah.
venues and a lot of gatherings are being canceled, you know, there has been some speculations about these weird online events. Where someone plays, where some band plays music, and the audience kind of watches it on their screens. I don't think that that can, that could replace, going to the actual gig. I think that could never replace the live experience, Jeff.
Yeah, I hope you're right. I tend to agree with you. In fact, I have tons of friends that are, or, musicians that I know that have tried to do streams and this and that. And some of them, do it more often than others. But, if you talk to them, it's not the same. It's kind of like a comedian. If a comedian has no audience to laugh at their jokes, it's hard to know if they're funny. And so if a comedian's streaming their show and they say a joke, they get to the end of the punchline and nobody's there to applaud or clap or laugh, that's got to be painful, man. And it's no different from a musician. If you're playing something, you kind of want to feel that coming back at you, and that's hard to do. That's the one thing that you really don't get that immediacy with streaming live to people. I mean, there are chat rooms and there's the ability to kind of discuss things, but you can't see their faces, and that's just the human experience, and that's what performing is about. So, no, I think it'll never replace live music. It's going to change things, but hopefully not too drastically.
That's a very good point, Jeff.
All right, I think live music is coming back sooner or later, so we just have to be patient.
I hope
But
so.
but I would love to ask you to perform a little song for us here, just to give a little glimpse of what you can do to our audience.
Sure. I can play a little piece. Let me. Now I'm gonna go ahead and turn on. I'm gonna turn on the piano, which might make you feedback a little. Are you ready? Oh, you're
Yes,
muted.
we're
Okay.
muted.
Okay. All right. Moving away, changing your life. A simple smile to hide the tears. And down the road, as far as you'll stray, I'll never leave you. You're always in my heart. Take a piece of love, hold it in your hands. Keep me in your pocket when you call, yeah. I'll be there when you turn around. You'll see my face appear. I'll be there when you least expect. You'll see me in the mirror, in your house, down your street. No matter where you are, don't be scared, 'cause I'll be there. That's a little something.
So, dear listeners, you have just heard a piece by our dear guest, Jeffrey Bryan. Jeffrey, thank you very much for playing that beautiful song. I genuinely enjoyed it. Now,
Thank
we
you.
want to do a bit of trivia with you, some trivia questions. So, Jeff, first of all, I want to ask you, and this, I'm sorry if this is a tough question. Um, you can try to answer it, of course. So, what five albums would you want with you on a desert island?
Okay. All right. Oh wow, there's so many good ones. Five's not easy, but okay. Probably The
Yeah,
Wall, Pink Floyd, The Wall. Um, Brian Ferry, Beta Noir. Something from Sting. Could be anything. Some Ten Sumner's Tales. Any one of his records. Mercury Rising. Uh, any one of his records. Let me see. The ones I really. Oh, you got to have an ELO record. Kind of trying to think. Fleetwood Mac, Rumors. Got to have that. Is that five? I could go on.
That's five. Yeah, we could all go on with this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah. Oh my God. There's so many. I'll probably hang up and go, oh, I didn't even think of that. Forgot about that one. I like that.
Some great choices there, by the way. I love the rumors. I love the wall. Those are also some of my all-time favorites. But I have to check out that Brian Ferry record. I've never heard that one. So
Oh my God. Yeah. I've been a Brian Ferry fan since Roxy Music. Uh, and his music is just like nobody else's. And it's so classy and sophisticated and yet it's really sexy. Um, anyway, check him out.
yeah, I love Roxy music as well. And I noticed that recently a lot of TV shows on HBO started incorporating Roxy music into these new shows. So this music still has such an amazing value. Uh,
Yeah.
but another interesting question that we would like to ask you is uh, if you could jam with any musician in the world, who would that be?
Wow. Paul McCartney and maybe Steve Ferroni from the drummer from Tom Petty.
I'm so glad that you picked a bassist and a drummer because I'm a bass player, and obviously I hold, I have a special place in my heart for good drummers and obviously for bassists. So
Well,
thank you,
as a
Jeff.
keyboard
Thank you
player,
so much.
you're welcome. But as a keyboard player, I want to play with a good rhythm section.
I mean, that's
You know,
that's your foundation. That's the foundation of music, isn't it?
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes,
Those are
right,
heroes
Jeff.
of mine.
Absolutely. Okay, so now we are approaching the end of this episode. Unfortunately, to be fair, dear listeners, thank you again for listening to our podcast. Check out our social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Also, check out our Patreon page. And if you want to have a variety of platforms for listening to our show. You can check our Linktree link where we have all our links. Jeff, thank you very much for coming on the show today. Would you like to share with our audience all of your accounts and websites?
Oh yeah, thank you. Well, I enjoyed it too, Alex and Vlada, very much. You can find me at the best place to find me is my website, which is jeffreybryanmusic.com, spelled JEFFBRYAN music, music.com. And then from there, I've got my YouTube page and my Facebook page. It's all easy to get to from there. So that's probably the best place.
Yes, fantastic, fantastic, Jeff. Thank you very much. Everybody out there, if you're a band or independent musician, and if you would like to either have an interview with us or maybe include your music in our podcast, feel free to email us or send us a message on some of our social media accounts. Lara, what's your final word?
First of all, I have to say I enjoyed this immensely.
Thank you.
Jeff, it's amazing to listen to you tell all your stories, and you have so much to tell as a musician and an extremely talented one at that. So thank you so much for taking part in our show. We really appreciate it. Dear listeners, hope you enjoyed this as much as we did. And we'll be having more interviews in the upcoming months. So stay tuned. You may hear some of your favorite musicians on this podcast as well. So, uh, all the best, and we'll see you real soon.